What's going on, guys? Bobby Betts Fights back for another week of breakdowns. This time we got the highly anticipated BMF belt that is on the line, UFC 291. We got Dustin Poirier facing off against the highlight Justin Gaethje in what is going to be absolute fireworks, certified banger, whatever you want to call it. It is going to be an awesome fight. I'm super pumped for it. As always, going to start off with the early prelims, and we're going to break down every single fight all the way up through the main event. I'll give you guys my pick for each fight and my plays that I have so far this week. But before that, follow your boy on social media. Help him out on Twitter, on YouTube, on betmma.tips. It's going to be Bobby Betts Fights. So first things first, let's go ahead and recap last week, see how we did against the bookies. So for UFC Fight Night, Aspinall versus Tybura in London, across the pond, we did okay. Would have liked it to be a bigger night, but more importantly, we got off the schneid. We had a winning week. So we ended up profiting for a half a unit. It's about $25.52, 9% return on investment. So a lot of minus plays, which is why the juice ate up a lot of the profit. If we had one more fight go our way, we would have been making some real money. But anyway, let's go ahead and go through each one of them. So we'll start off with Bruno Brazil against Shauna Bannon. Exactly what I thought in the breakdown. Bannon was going to have more volume, but Brazil was going to have more impactful strikes. She was able to mix in some wrestling and get some top control, and she just hit harder than Bannon did. She got the W, minus 130. We ended up profiting for $46.15 because I added a little bit extra on that one at 1.2 units. Pannie Kianzad against Ketlen Vieira. I had her at plus 148 as a dog. She was down to plus 125, so a lot of CLV on that bet. I really liked it a lot. And Ketlen Vieira just laid on top of her for 2 rounds, and then Kianzad did more damage to Ketlen Vieira in 2 minutes and 30 seconds than Vieira did the entire fight to Kianzad. But we score fights on rounds, and you couldn't give Kianzad 2 rounds when she was just being sat on. So Ketlen Vieira wins a boring 29-28 decision as per usual. And it is what it is. So we drop a unit on that. Next fight, Daniel Marcos versus Davey Grant. Interesting one because Davey Grant definitely outvolumed through a lot more strikes. And you could say landed on Daniel Marcos. But Daniel Marcos landed cleaner. He did more damage to Davey Grant. Busted up his nose. Was bleeding all over the place. And a split decision win for Daniel Marcos, and we ended up cashing at minus 127. So the only thing I'll say about that fight is normally with how the judges judge fights, Davey Grant should have won that fight. He threw more, he was landing more, but the judges this fight decided that they were going to pay close attention and see who was landing cleaner and make a determination off of that. It's inconsistency with the judging. It needs to be fixed. I pointed back to it on Twitter. You cannot have AJ Dobson versus Armin Petrosyan. That decision exists along with Daniel Marcos and Davey Grant. AJ Dobson versus Armin Petrosyan was the same thing. Armin Petrosyan touching him with the leg kicks, was pumping the jab out there, threw double the strikes AJ Dobson did, but a lot of them were landing on Dobson's shell. Dobson came back, busted up Armin Petrosyan's nose, and appeared to be landing cleaner when he threw. But he didn't throw nearly as often as Petrosyan, and Petrosyan won a unanimous decision 30-27 across the board. So how do you have those 2 fights exist with 2 completely different decisions? That's my only gripe with it. We need some consistency. Never going to complain about a cash bet. I think it was a cash bet. I think it was a close fight, to be honest with you, not a robbery. And we cash on Daniel Marcos for $39.37. Moving on, Nathaniel Wood against Andre Fili. Close fight. If you took Andre Fili as a dog, not a bad play. Nathaniel Wood won decision 29-28. Had to have that dog in him come back a little bit after getting dropped against Fili. Fili showed some good. Fili showed that he still got it. I'll be honest with you. Minus 190. I put 1.52 units on it. My biggest bet of the night. Cashed for Nathaniel Wood $40. And then we had a parlay with Aspinall to win inside the distance and Andre Muniz to beat Paul Craig, and Andre Muniz lost to Paul Craig. I was surprised. I'm not very high on Paul Craig, and in my breakdown previous week, I really took it to Paul Craig. But he finds ways to win. It was a TKO win against Muniz. I still think Paul Craig is going to be a fade in the future, depending on who he's matched up against, anyone who's competent. I think I just had a little bit too much stock in Muniz, favored his striking over Paul Craig, but, you live, you learn. you don't try to analyze two bad strikers against each other, I guess. I don't know. I probably should have stayed off of it. Taking the juice on Muniz at minus 225. Probably not the right play there, but still don't really regret it because I really don't think Paul Craig's that much of a fighter. So we ended up losing that parlay, so we dropped the unit. So when smoke clears, $25.52. So for the year, what we're looking at, we're up 24.55 units, which is $1,227.50 worth of profit. And we're going to go ahead and look to keep it rolling into UFC 291. So let's go ahead and kick it off with the first fight that we got, which is Miranda Maverick versus Priscilla Cachoeira. I think this is one where it's the glaring... the holes in each person's game are pretty glaring at this point. I mean, Miranda Maverick, if she's not able to get the takedown, she can get out-volumed on the feet by someone who's a better striker, and she also can get taken down by people who can grapple, I would say, are upper echelon, plus grapplers. Priscilla Cachoeira, if you can wrestle, you can beat Priscilla Cachoeira. She's not good takedown defense. She's liable to get out-wrestled. But man, can she crack. And she's kind of one of those girls at flyweight that actually has pop in her hands that can put you out. Saw that against Ariana Lipski where she just floored her in her past fights. She's able to do a lot of damage. But she finds herself really chasing her opponents. She doesn't cut off the cage well. So you really have to have an opponent who's willing to just come forward and get in her grill and be hittable and there to be hit for Priscilla Cachoeira to have success. You need someone who's willing to stay there and trade, not someone who's going to circle around the cage. If there's anyone that has any type of movement that's in and out or semi-defensively sound, it's going to give Priscilla Cachoeira fits. But if you're there to be hit and she finds your chin, she can definitely drop you and put you out. So that's what it boils down to. I mean, Miranda Maverick's a huge favorite in this fight. Opened right around minus 325. She dropped a little bit. She's at minus 315. Priscilla Cachoeira is right around plus 250 as it stands right now. So at that line, it's always dog or pass for me. I don't think Maverick's playable, especially coming off the Jusuda Vicious loss, even though that's a completely different fighter that she's fighting right now. It was pretty telling. I mean, Miranda Maverick, I don't think she hits as hard as we thought she did. I think she's kind of more pitter-patter on the feet. And then, she's liable to get taken down. I mean, she has good, takedown offense, a little bit of something off her back, but outside of the armbar attempt that Jusuda Vicious was just kind of stuck in and rode out the round in the first, Maverick didn't have anything for Jusuda Vicious. She even got out-volumed and touched up on the feet, and Jusuda Vicious was able to mix in those takedowns. So, coming off a tough loss, but this one's kind of on a plate for her. I'm going to go with Miranda Maverick here because I think she's going to be able to mix in the wrestling and get Cachoeira down to the ground. And Cachoeira is just going to have to worry about that. She's not very good at getting back up to her feet. She's horrible off of her back. And she has to literally gouge out an eye to get back up to her feet. So, it's just going to be... I got this one going to a decision. I think Maverick's just going to be able to take her down at will, mix in some striking, stay safe, stay on the outside, and just avoid any type of big shot from Priscilla Cachoeira. So going with Miranda Maverick, but no bet. Moving on, we got Matthew Semelsberger versus Uros Medic. In this one, Medic is coming up from lightweight to fight at welterweight, which he has done before outside of the UFC. Longtime Alaska FC vet. Not the greatest level of competition outside of the UFC, but he has proven that he can beat UFC level competition. Win over Omar Morales, win over Elan Cruz, and then drop the tough fight to Jalen Turner. So you have... I would say Elan Cruz, he's cut. He's out of the UFC. Not the greatest level of competition. You have Jalen Turner, who's ranked at lightweight, had a very competitive fight against Dan Hooker and Mateusz Gamrot. That's top tier. And then you have kind of Omar Morales hanging out in the middle towards the back end, which is, a guy who's won in the UFC, but really doesn't offer any real... he's not much of a finisher. He's a guy who's won a couple of decisions. He's a very cerebral fighter. But, against Matthew Semelsberger, who's very athletic and has tools, is very quick and has just absolute cement bricks for hands, it's going to be tough to really gauge where Uros Medic falls in this fight. Uros Medic, all around, I would say has a better game than Matthew Semelsberger, who's primarily going to use his boxing and use his hands. He can mix in some wrestling, but he's really not going to kick, where Uros Medic has very good leg kicks. He can mix them up to all levels. He can go low. He can hit you in the body. And then he's just going to try to chop you down and then be able to land those strikes and land that left hand. Matthew Semelsberger, on the other hand, is extremely athletic. He's very long, very big for welterweight. At 170, and he's had some great performances in the past. I mean, even in his last loss to Jeremiah Wells, he dropped Wells twice and then just got out wrestled. He doesn't have to worry about that in this fight. I'd say he has the wrestling advantage. I don't see Medic being able to take him down like AJ. He doesn't have the wrestling of like an AJ Fletcher. He doesn't have the wrestling of a Jeremiah Wells. So really, Semelsberger just knows that he's getting a striker in this match. The only thing that he has to worry about is, the all levels that Uros Medic can fight to, and Medic is a southpaw. So that's the only thing that really concerns me in this matchup is Uros being a southpaw, and I should say that Uros can mix in those kicks and has some pop in his hands. I don't want to discount Medic, but in this one I really do favor Semelsberger. If we look at the line, it opened up Semelsberger is minus 155. He's now minus 205, so 50 cents worth of movement. You know that you got some sharps on Matthew Semelsberger to get that kind of movement, especially this early in the week. So I'm going to go ahead and go with Semelsberger in this one. I think he is my pick, but at this point, I don't have a play on him. I missed the line movement, and minus 205 is just a little bit too rich for me. So I'm going to go with Matthew Semelsberger as the pick. Don't have a bet. Moving on, we got CJ Vergara versus Vinicius Salvador. This is an interesting fight because I do like CJ Vergara. I've taken him in his previous fights. I took him against Tatsuro Taira as a big dog, plus 280. I took him against Clydeson Rodriguez, where he was able to get that win. He was also a huge underdog in that fight, right around plus 280. So varied success betting CJ Vergara. I think he really has that quote unquote dog in him, and that's what really makes him outperform the line, fight in and fight out. But he does have his flaws. One, he's got a very underrated ground game that he doesn't go to unless the fight ends up going there. If his opponent takes it there, he's willing to do it, like against Clydeson Rodriguez. Rodriguez goes for a takedown, and CJ Vergara ends up reversing him. He is liable to stay on his back. Tatsuro Taira is an upper echelon grappler at flyweight, so it really is tough to say that Vergara got dominated, because he did in those positions, but in that fight, he was able to fight out of a lot of Tatsuro Taira's submission attempts until he got caught in one. But he did end up having at the end of the first round pretty solid. It was either the first or second round where he was in deep on a submission with Taira. There just wasn't enough time for him to complete it. I think it was a triangle, but yeah, he had his own grappling success, but he's kind of a guy that will take it wherever he's comfortable with his entire skill set. If it's on the feet, he's willing to take one to give one. He's got a solid jab as well. But the guy he's fighting is a wild card in Vinicius Salvador, and kind of similar to his previous opponent that Vergara faced in Daniel Lacerda. He fights with his chin up, Salvador, and he's willing to take one to give one. But when he takes one, he comes back with like 3 or 4 wild hooks. Not the most accurate striker. Victor Altamirano was able to stay out of danger the majority of that fight, but Salvador, for 15 minutes, he's going to go hard, and he's going to be looking to finish the fight at all times. I think he's got a solid gas tank, so fighting at elevation isn't going to be an issue for either one of these guys. They can definitely go hard 3 rounds. It's just going to be tough because Vergara, I think he's got the advantage. Altamirano was able to take Salvador down multiple times and keep him there. I think Vergara is a better grappler than Altamirano, but Vergara has less than 1 takedown completed in his UFC tenure. He really doesn't force the issue to take it down there, and I think he's going to be willing to stand and bang, and I think that's going to make this fight close. I think Salvador has a chance. Lacerda hurt Vergara multiple times in the first round of that fight and wasn't able to finish it because Vergara's a tough one to get out of there. But Salvador, I really do think he's got a shot in this one. He could definitely hurt Vergara on the feet. Vergara can definitely hurt Salvador because he keeps his chin up in the air and he throws from his hip, and he's just wide open to get countered. But he's such a long, awkward striker that he can give guys problems. So in this one, I do like Vinicius Salvador. I'm gonna pick him, and I also have a bet at him. I got 1 unit. I got him at plus 148, and the line's moving in his favor. He's now down to plus 130. So I got Vinicius Salvador for a unit at plus 148. that concludes the early prelims. We move on. We got Jake Matthews versus Darius Flowers. Now, this was a fight that was added late, so as far as the opener, DraftKings just opened up the line today. Not sure what it ended up at, or if it opened up on the offshores. I wasn't really paying too much attention to them because it was a late fight that was added. But as it stands right now, Jake Matthews is at minus 260, Darius Flowers is at plus 220. I think Matthews was right around minus 270 earlier, so a little bit of movement towards Flowers as the underdog to start, but we really haven't had that line marinate very long to really see where it's moving. So can't go off of much. But in this one, I mean, Jake Matthews has had a varied level of success in the UFC for many, many years. You know, he was fighting in the UFC since he was 19, and he still hasn't hit 30. I think he's 28 at this point, so he's still young, but a lot of tread on the tires for Jake Matthews. Jack of all trades, master of none. I think he's good all around. I think he's shown flashes that he can be an above average to, I wouldn't say great, but an above average UFC fighter. A guy that can knock on the door of the top 15, maybe even stay in that, 13 to 15 rank range. But he just hasn't been able to put it all together. You look at his past performances. I mean, against Andre Filio, he looked like a world beater. Against a guy who's a primary striker, just totally outclassed him and had just a picture-perfect performance and ended up knocking him out. And then you go and he fights Matthew Semelsberger. He gets dropped 3 times, doesn't look that great, looks pretty tentative on the feet, and loses a decision. So you don't really know what you're going to get with Jake Matthews. He has been out-grappled before. Sean Brady, pretty dominant performance against Jake Matthews. And he just hasn't really been able to put it all together. He's got a guy in Darius Flowers who's got a strong wrestling background. He has a boxing background as well. He has fought professionally as a boxer. He hasn't had much success, 1-10 as a boxer, but that really isn't indicative of success in MMA. It's completely different. So you can't really put too much stock into a boxing career, because when you're able to mix your martial arts, it opens up a lot. So Darius Flowers coming in off the Contender Series against Gogalatse. Gogalatse had a submission on Darius Flowers, and he kind of muscled out of it and got a slam and was able to jar the guy's shoulder loose. So he ended up getting a TKO due to injury. But I think Darius Flowers is very game. I worry about his gas tank late in the fight, especially taking it on such short notice in Salt Lake City at elevation, which really plays, a pretty heavy factor into these fights. I mean, you really have to get there early, get acclimated, and really trust your training camp to make sure your cardio is on point. And I just don't know if he's going to be able to do that. I think Jake Matthews is going to be consistent. I think he's going to be able to touch him on the feet. He's going to be the taller, the bigger fighter, even though Darius Flowers is a smaller guy, kind of more of a muscle hamster. I really just favor Jake Matthews in this fight as a minus 220 favorite, though. I really don't have a play on him. I don't think there's really any room to play. You got Roman Kopylov facing off against Claudio Ribeiro. Ribeiro is another one, kind of a wild striker, likes to wing those hooks. A lot of knockouts on his record. He's a good kicker as well. In the Abdul Razak Al Hassan fight, which was his UFC debut, he showed that he can really chop the legs and kick to all levels. And then from there, try to mix in his hands. Razak Al Hassan in the second round, who has a lot of pop in his hands. You can't really compare him to a Roman Kopylov, who's a more technical boxer on the feet. Ended up touching Ribeiro and was able to put him out. But, no shame in that. Razak Al Hassan is just that. He's got that kind of pop in his hands. In this fight, though, he's fighting Roman Kopylov, who's a very polished boxer. Very good in and out. Just an absolute masterclass against Puna Soriano. And before that, was able to get Alicia DeCherico out of there in the third round after a pretty good back and forth. I think Kopylov's hard to hit. He's kind of he didn't have much success early on against like an Albert Duraev, and he even had a tough fight in Carl Robertson in his UFC debut. But he's kind of coming to his own, and I think he's getting more comfortable in the UFC because his past 2 performances really reflect that. I mean, 89% takedown defense. He's a guy who's going to sprawl and not brawl, sprawl and then box you up. I really do think he should be the favorite in this fight. I thought Ribeiro might get a little bit of steam, but as it stands right now, I mean, Kopylov was minus 220 and Ribeiro was plus 180 when it opened up, and Claudio Ribeiro is plus 195 right now, and Roman Kopylov's plus minus 235. So money coming in on Kopylov. And you can kind of see it when you look at the tape. I mean, Ribeiro, he's got those wild hooks. He wings them. But Kopilov's just consistent, fighting out of that southpaw stance, and he's got a very good jab. He establishes it. He's very good defensively. He can counter-strike. And a guy like Ribeiro, who's kind of wild and leaves himself open with those big winging hooks, I think Kopilov's going to be able to tee off. And, it's going to be tough to get Ribeiro out of there. But if Kopilov's able to do so, he's going to be able to work that body like he did against Soriano, really hurt him, and then he's going to just, once he opens up the body, the head's going to go. So it might be a late finish for Kopylov or a decision win. Either way, Kopilov's going to be my pick in that one. Don't have a bet on it, though, at this moment. Moving on, we got Derek Lewis against Marcos Rogerio de Lima. So this is one where the line just blew up. So this was more of a pick 'em. It was plus 100. Derek Lewis was slight underdog, plus 100. Marcos de Lima, minus 120. As it stands right now, De Lima's minus 200 and Derek Lewis is plus 175. So just almost $1 worth of movement towards Rogerio de Lima, which is crazy. I think Derek Lewis is getting discounted heavily in this fight, and I can kind of see why at the surface, but I'm actually going to... A lot of people are zigging, I'm going to zag in this matchup, and here's why. Rogerio de Lima, this is what everyone thinks is going to happen in this matchup. He's going to come out, he's going to kick the legs, he's going to hurt Lewis with the leg kicks, he's going to wing those big hooks, he's going to be able to take Derek Lewis down. You think 1, 2, 3, I mean, that's pretty much MMA right there. He can wrestle him, he can get him down to the ground, he can touch him on the feet, he can touch him with his feet with the leg kicks. But the one thing I think people are really not counting on is, one, Derek Lewis is not dumb. Derek Lewis is a very, very tricky fighter, and he knows what you're trying to do in each one of his fights. I mean, look at the Blades fight. He knew Blades was going to shoot eventually. Basically was a wash in the first round. Blades touched him up, beat him up on the feet. It looked like, oh my God, Blades can win the striking. He's going to win this fight, right? Lewis was waiting for Blades to shoot that shot, and he threw an uppercut and put his lights out. Against Tai Tuivasa, it ended up being a loss, but what did Derek Lewis do? He mixed in takedowns because he knew that Tuivasa could not wrestle. He thought, no one's expecting me to do this. I'm going to try this. I really do think that Lewis knows that Rogerio de Lima, who's the same age as Lewis, they're both, I think, 38 or 39 years old, he knows that he's going to come out hot, and he knows he's going to be kicking the legs, and he knows he's going to be winging those big shots. I really do think Derek Lewis is going to play possum like he did against Volkov, and when Rogerio de Lima starts to get tired, Derek Lewis is going to pounce. I really do think that he's going to be able to withstand the barrage that Rogerio de Lima puts up against him in the first round, and if he does, he's going to have a lot more steam left in the tank than Rogerio de Lima does, who gassed out early in the second against Waldo Acosta-Cortez, and luckily was able to mix in some takedowns to kind of save him because he got beat on in the third. I think Lewis, it's going to be the same thing. I don't think it's going to be as easy as people think. I really do think Lewis has a shot to finish this fight and finish it late, and I think he's going to be cerebral about it. He's a very tricky guy, and unless de Lima can really hurt him with those first couple shots, I think Derek Lewis is being discounted pretty heavily. So I don't have a bet on it, but I'm going with Derek Lewis as my pick because he's tricky, and I think the Black Beast has one more trick up his sleeve to get this win. Moving on, we got Gabriel Bonfim versus Trevin Giles. In this one, Trevin Giles, pretty consistent fighter. The jack of all trades, master of none moniker that I dubbed on Jake Matthews can also apply to Trevin Giles. He's a guy who is solid on the feet. He can definitely jab. He can definitely compete on the feet against most people, but it's always just that one opening that he leaves that he doesn't account for that ends up getting him clipped, like against Michael Morales and against Dricus du Plessis. Just underestimates them being able to close the distance on him, and he ends up getting checked and ends up getting clipped and ends up getting finished. But other than that, I mean, he's good wrestling. He's got good takedown defense. You saw that he beat Roman Dolidze, and they had quite a bit of heavy grappling going on in that fight, and Trevin Giles was able to end up on top in a lot of the grappling exchanges and was able to get out of a lot of Roman Dolidze's submission attempts, which have been pretty lethal in the run that Roman Dolidze's been on. So very good submission defense for Giles. His past two performances have been pretty shaky. I thought Preston Parsons beat him 29-28 in his past fight, and then against Louis Kosei, really nothing happened in that fight for 2 rounds. Kosei just was so afraid to gas out that he didn't throw, and Giles just kind of touched him for 2 rounds and then got taken down by Kosei, and Kosei just didn't have enough time to do anything. Giles ended up getting out of that, got on top for a little bit, but I think it ended up being 29-28 across the board for Giles. In this fight, Gabriel Bonfim, who's a prospect that came in off Contender Series, highly touted, undefeated guy. Really good, has a great boxing background, and also has like just lights out lethal jiu-jitsu as well. He's a guy that's going to club and sub. He's not really going to go for a lot of his own takedowns to get it to the ground. He's more of a guy who's going to beat you up on the feet, and when the time's right, he's going to snatch a neck up. Much like the Trey Flowers fight, where he's able to hurt Flowers, get it down. Flowers ended up having a guillotine, and then just Bonfim was able to use that shoulder pressure to get the choke, which was pretty nifty because everyone thought that Flowers was the one that was attacking with the submission in that fight, and then all of a sudden he's the one tapping, which is crazy. Against Munir Laziz, same thing. I mean, Laziz, they come together, Bonfim grabs a neck and ends up mounting him for a guillotine to get that win early on in that fight. So Bonfim is liable to get hit. He holds his hands kind of far apart, so strikes right down the middle that Trevin Giles does throw with the jab and the straight are going to hurt him. But I think in this fight, it's just, I think Bonfim is going to be able to pressure. He's going to be able to land something significant. It may not be early in the fight, but in that early in that second round is when I really think the tide's going to turn for him. I think it can be pretty much even in the first, maybe Trevin Giles having some success, but I think Bonfim at some point is going to crack him. And once the fight hits the mat, I think Bonfim's going to be able to get on top of Trevin Giles and just threaten with a lot of submissions. Even if he doesn't get him, I think he's going to be able to keep Giles guessing and keep him in the dominant position for the majority of the fight. So if we look at the odds, as it stands right now, I mean, from what it's saying on the UFC's website, this is completely wrong because they have Gabriel Bonfim at plus 260. I would be beating down doors to get Gabriel Bonfim at plus 260 right now. I would put a lot of money on Gabriel Bonfim as an underdog. But Gabriel Bonfim actually is the favorite in this fight. He's at minus 320. Trevin Giles at plus 265. When it opened, Bonfim was minus 315. Giles is plus 260. So not a lot of line movement, but Gabriel Bonfim's still a huge favorite. Bonfim's going to be my pick in this one. I just think, like I said, he's going to be able to touch Trevin Giles. He's going to be the one that's going to be able to land the more devastating strikes. He might eat some jabs. He might eat some stray shots, but when he touches Giles, Giles is going to feel it more than when Giles touches Bonfim. And then when it goes to the mat, like I said, I wouldn't be out of the realm of Bonfim snatching up a neck, getting a mounted guillotine on Trevin Giles after he hurts him on the feet. Club and sub is his MO. And yeah, that's what I'm going with. So got Gabriel Bonfim as my pick, but no bet on it as it stands right now. And that's going to lead us into our first fight on the main card to kick us off. We got Michael Chiesa facing off against Kevin Holland. Really, in this one, it is a clash of styles because you got Chiesa, who really strikes to close the distance so he can work his wrestling, get it down to the ground, work his jiu-jitsu, where you got Kevin Holland, who's going to want to keep it at range. He's got those long-range weapons. He's very long, lengthy, got good reach, and he's going to want to keep it at that distance and look for openings, which he should have quite a bit against Michael Chiesa, who's not much of a striker. So it's going to boil down to whether or not Chiesa can get this down to the mat and if he can keep it there for extended periods of time, because Kevin Holland is liable to getting taken down. We saw that in the Brunson fight. We saw that in his past performances where he can get taken down and he can get held down. I think against Khamzat Chimaev, he did show the ability to scramble. He did get finished in the first round in that fight, but Khamzat's a different level of wrestler than, the majority of the division. I don't think Michael Chiesa is on that level as far as the wrestling is concerned. But Chiesa is going to go back to the well with it. He's going to look to control you on the ground. He's going to look to work submissions. So Chiesa is liable to getting submitted himself. It's happened before. Once he gets down to the ground, his aggression can be his biggest detriment sometimes. Saw that in the Luque fight where Luque was able to fight out of the submission attempt, work his own offense, and ended up getting a submission of his own. So, when it boils down to it, it's can Kevin Holland get off his offense, keep it at range, and can Michael Chiesa keep it down on the mat for extended periods of time. So in this one, as long as Kevin Holland's hand is fully healed up and he has all of his weapons, I'm going to go ahead and edge Kevin Holland in this one. I'm going to go ahead and take him just because he's got such a better tool belt on the feet than Michael Chiesa does, and I really do think he'll be able to touch him up and be the more damaging striker when it's standing. I think he'll be able to work back up to his feet. I mean, I imagine he's been drilling it, especially fighting some of these wrestlers in the past. He's got to level up that wrestling defense at the very least. So I'm going to go ahead and take Kevin Holland in that. The line's been pretty stagnant. Chiesa's plus 125, Kevin Holland's minus 145. It's been that way since Sunday, so we will see how it moves. But I'm going to go ahead and pick Kevin Holland. No bet on that. Moving on, we got Tony Ferguson facing off against Bobby Green. So this is an interesting fight. Really, it really what it boils down to is you know what you're going to get with Bobby Green each time he comes out. You know, he's going to have that shell, he's going to shoulder roll, and he's going to just throw a ton of volume at you, but he's not really a threat to land like a big one-punch power shot and really put a guy out. You know, he's going to throw together combinations, but really it's going to be that jab and that he's going to be hitting you with, and it's just going to be 1-2s and just extended combinations and just working, just boxing and his movement. He keeps his hands really low and just working pretty much head movement and that shoulder roll that he relies on to get out of the way of punches. So that's just Bobby Green's style. You know, a tough fight for really anyone stylistically, just because he's so awkward. He's got good takedown defense. Tony Ferguson on the other side, I mean, his past performances, he's fought some tough competition. You know, I'm not going to say that he's totally lost it, but you know, he visibly looked slow against Nate Diaz when you go back and look at that tape. I mean, I think Diaz was up 2-1 in my opinion going into that fourth round before he ended up getting submitted. And it really, you see Tony Ferguson work through submissions before, like really, really, really dangerous positions like Charles Oliveira's armbar. And for Nate Diaz to just grab a guillotine and for Tony to tap that quickly, there's only a couple things on my mind. One, Tony doesn't have that fight in him anymore as he's older and he's taking this damage, or it was a fixed fight, one or the other, because it was bizarre, really, in my opinion, to see Tony just tap that quickly and not try to fight through the adversity like he always does and what he's known for. I mean, every meme that's out about Tony Ferguson is really just him just battling adversity. Tony Ferguson picks up a drug addiction just so he could have something to beat. That's just who Tony is. So that's something that really sticks out at me on paper, is that fight against Diaz, that quick tap. He looked visibly slow. I mean, against Chandler, he took a big front kick, but he did have some success in the striking early on. The other guys grappled him. Beneil Dariush and Charles Oliveira both use their grappling to get Tony Ferguson down, hold him down, and ride out this decision victory. So, I mean, Chandler's really the only one that really put him away, and Gaethje really put a beating on him. So I just think in this one, really, it's tough to really side with Tony Ferguson, just with how bad he's looked previously, and knowing that Bobby Green, although he is on the older side himself and he does have his own flaws, he's still that guy that's got that quick hand speed. He's still the guy that gave Rafael Fiziev a run for his money in the third round, and the guy who was visibly beating up Drew Dober until he got caught. I really do think Bobby Green's still got some left in the tank, a lot more than Tony Ferguson does, and I just don't see an area where Tony's going to be able to take control of this fight. I think Bobby Green has the volume. I think Bobby Green has the wrestling defense to keep it standing. I just don't see Tony being able to land anything that would really hurt Bobby. I think he'll be able to shoulder roll out of the way and see it. The kicks, maybe, if Tony can mix it in, but I think he's just going to be eating jabs all night from Bobby, and he's going to piece him up. So, I did get in on Bobby Green, and I got in on him early because for some reason they opened the line at plus 130, and I was able to see it and catch it. So, I have 2 units on Bobby Green, which is pretty much a max play for me. I got him at plus 130. I mean, the line's moved crazy since that opener, which was, a month and a half ago. I normally don't bet openers, but when you see something that big of a mistake, you got to capitalize. So Bobby Green, as it stands right now, is a minus 375 favorite. Actually, he's minus 410. He not opened, but on Sunday he was right around minus 375, and money's come in on him even more. Tony Ferguson is El Cachoeira. He's a legend. He's probably going to be a UFC Hall of Famer. Had some bad luck in his career. I'm a huge Tony Ferguson fan. El Cachoeira all the way, but in this one I got to go with Bobby Green. And yeah, we'll see how much Tony has left in the tank, but I just don't see it. Going with Bobby Green and have that wager on him. Moving on, we got Stephen Wonderboy Thompson facing off against Michel Pereira. Another interesting fight because you got Stephen Thompson, known for that karate style on the balls of his feet, in and out. There's straight shots right down the pipe that really just drill his opponents. He's very tough to hit. He's also very tough to take down. He's the guy that's really almost a pioneer for that style of defend all the takedowns and then beat you up on the feet. he's kind of like the poster boy for that. I mean, not as of recently. I mean, he's pushing 40, and the guys that have been able to take him down have been just extraordinary grapplers, like Gilbert Burns and Bilal Muhammad. So no shade there, but he is getting up there at 40, but still is a lethal striker. Recently beat Kevin Holland, even though Kevin Holland got hurt. You still can't knock Stephen Thompson. He's a very, very game opponent, which is the reason why he's still ranked number 7th at welterweight. On the other end, you have Michel Pereira, younger fighter, just equally as unique in his style, where, beforehand, he was almost a wild Cachoeira fighter who was just out there to put on a show. If you go back and watch his previous fights against Tristan Connolly, in some of his first fights in the UFC, you just see him running off the side of the cage, him chasing his opponents. He backflips into as a guard pass. It's just techniques that you never ever seen before in the octagon. He's just bizarre. He's weird. He's awkward, and but it all kind of flows together in this kind of like beautiful like chaos that is Michel Pereira. I have no other way to describe it. He has toned it down recently, to try to be more competitive and less stupid. So the fight IQ has been a little bit higher, and you've seen that in his performances. He's still electric. He still has that weird timing with his shots, and he'll still do awkward things. He is liable to getting hit himself, but he is pretty durable for the most part. He can mix in some kicks. He's trying to do that, add that as a part of his game. I think when he kicks, he has success. I think they're, solid leg kicks. He's a powerful dude, a very strong dude as well for welterweight. And yeah, I think he's got a decent all-around game when he can really reel it in. Now, the question is he going to be able to, one, keep up with a Stephen Wonderboy Thompson and be able to get off his own offense without getting hit? And will he be able to maintain his cardio for 3 rounds at elevation in Salt Lake City? That's the two main questions that I have around Michel Pereira. Now, as far as the line's concerned, Stephen Thompson was right around minus 175 on Sunday. Michel Pereira's plus 150. We got 20 cents of movement in Michel Pereira's way, so he's plus 130 now. So money's coming in on him. For me, I was edging Stephen Thompson initially, but I'm starting to lean more towards Michel Pereira, and I think just being the younger fighter, he can be just a hair faster than Stephen Thompson on some of these exchanges, and especially in the early rounds, like rounds 1 and rounds 2, that's when he can do a good amount of damage to Stephen Thompson. Michel Pereira can also mix in a takedown as well to get the fight to the ground, and Stephen Thompson against Holland, even though Holland didn't utilize them, he was able to take him down at the right time. So, I think as long as you can gain the respect on the feet with Thompson, you can work your wrestling. You just, he can't be expecting it. You gotta make him think that he's in a striking war, and then all of a sudden you go ahead and grab a leg and take him down, and then that's how you can get him down. So I definitely think Michel Pereira has a shot in this fight, and he can mix his martial arts. So that's why I'm gonna go with him as my pick. As far as a bet, I'm close to pulling the trigger on him, but I just haven't yet. So we will see. Just got to see how that line plays out, and his cardio is really what worries me in a matchup like this, but I'm going to go with the underdog in this pick in the younger fighter Michel Pereira. Moving on, we got Jan Blachowicz facing off against Alex Pereira. In this fight, Alex Pereira, he's the kickboxing legend that came over here and chased Israel Adesanya down for the 3rd consecutive time, knocked him out, took his belt, and then faced off against him for a 4th time, and Izzy finally got his revenge and knocked Alex Pereira out cold, and that was just a short 3 months ago in April that occurred. So Alex Pereira on the short layoff, really, and is coming right back in and gets to fight the number 3 light heavyweight in Jan Blachowicz, which, he was a 10-8 round away from winning a decision and being the light heavyweight champ. But after that Magomed Ankalaev fight, Dana said it was too boring, and he said, nope, neither guy's getting a shot at the belt, and I'm going to go ahead and set up a completely different fight. So tough luck for Jan, but I think in this one, you have a pretty one-dimensional fighter, in my opinion, in Alex Pereira. Yeah, he's shown that he can have the takedown defense, but, he is a primary striker, and he's very good at striking, don't get me wrong. He is lethal when it comes to the striking, but I think Blachowicz can hold his own on the feet. He's very powerful for a light heavyweight, and you got a guy coming up from middleweight to fight at light heavyweight, and you got a guy who hits hard, who's one of the hardest hitters for light heavyweight and one of the strongest dudes at light heavyweight, in my opinion. So I think there's going to be a strength advantage for Jan Blachowicz, and those leg kicks are really going to be a lot heavier than the leg kicks that Pereira's faced at middleweight. Jan Blachowicz kicks and punches a lot harder than Israel Adesanya. Yeah, he's a more stationary target. He doesn't flow like Izzy's, not nearly as athletic, but he has a high shell for defense, and he really can avoid a lot of power punches and a lot of damage that way. So it's tough for me to go against the all-around game of Jan Blachowicz, especially knowing that when he fought Izzy, he was able to take him down multiple times and really keep him down in those later rounds and win a convincing decision. So, I mean, against Alex Pereira, I don't know what Alex Pereira brings to the table that Israel Adesanya doesn't, except for a little bit more power and a little bit more pop in his shot. So you got Alex Pereira coming up from middleweight on a short layoff after being knocked out cold, and he's fighting up a weight class against the guy with a ton of power and has a very good wrestling base and is very strong. So I see a lot of positives lining up for Jan Blachowicz, and we're just kind of hoping that, Alex Pereira's fist go boop and puts Jan Blachowicz's lights out, which very well could happen. I mean, Alex Pereira, like Sean Strickland quoted, he said, the man touches you and you just die. Like, he has the kiss of death for those hands, but that was at middleweight where he could bully dudes and he was bigger. This is light heavyweight, and these boys are bigger. So I'm going with Jan Blachowicz. Actually got a wager on him. I got him at minus 114. As the line stands right now, it's minus 125. So the money is moving in towards Jan. Pereira, you can get him at plus 105 as it stands right now. Not a ton of movement, but I really do like the way Blachowicz fights, and in a 3-round fight, I think the wrestling is going to be pivotal in it. And then that leads us into our main event, which is Dustin Poirier versus Justin Gaethje. So these two have fought previously, and it was, a fight of the year candidate. Might have even won fight of the year. It was just that good of a fight. I mean, Dustin Poirier, incredible boxing, the pedigree, the combinations he can put together, his ability to throw off his back foot. He's got his eyes open at all times. He can counter that left hand, that southpaw stance. He's just very, very good on the feet, and he has extremely good boxing. And Justin Gaethje on the other end has tightened it up. He's a guy that can mix it up a little bit more than Poirier, who can kick to all levels and especially chop that leg like he did in the first matchup, where he pretty much took Poirier's leg completely out of it over the course of 3 rounds. But the thing that Poirier was able to do was to jump into range when he was throwing those kicks and just lay it on him with combinations, which is why two judges had Poirier up 2-1 going into that 4th round before the stoppage, where Poirier was able to catch Justin with one of those kicks, hit him with a straight shot right down the middle and wobbled him, and then he was able to pour it on like Poirier does, one of the best finishers in the game, and just really lay it on Gaethje thick. But Gaethje is a different fighter than when he fought Poirier the first time. I think he's just a little bit more polished, a little bit more defensively minded, and he's got better hands, where, instead of just Homer, like that they make fun of him with for being Homer Simpson, but just kind of like that brute strength and that brute athleticism. He's really polished his tools up, and he's able to throw those combinations. The uppercut's lethal, and he's just very good all around. So in this fight, you're looking at a fight of the night contender, and it's just going to be an all-out war back and forth. I think Poirier could get clipped by Gaethje, and Gaethje could finish him off, but I just think that Poirier, when I look at the first fight and you go back and you take a look at it, you see Poirier just jumping into range with those combinations and really laying it on Gaethje and hitting him in the body and in the head, and he's really just working those two areas where Gaethje's the one chopping the legs to try to work through it in the later rounds, and that's a great strategy and all. It's just you got to get to the later rounds, and I think Justin Gaethje's is going to take too much damage from Poirier trying that strategy where he chops the legs. Other than that, I just don't see him being able to stand with Poirier. If he, like I said, if he rocks Poirier like Chandler was able to do, and get him up and he's going for a finish, Poirier rolls with the punches well, and he keeps his eyes open, and he'll look to land that shovel uppercut or that hook, that right hand, and drop you just like he did Chandler. So he's really dangerous even when you think you got him up against the ropes. I just think it's going to be too much for Gaethje. I think this is the war that he's been looking for. doesn't have to worry about takedowns, and he's just going to go out there and prove that he's just a superior boxer to Justin Gaethje. So I got Dustin Poirier in this. As far as the line movement, it pretty much opened up a pick'em. I mean, Poirier was minus 120, Gaethje was plus 100, and Poirier is close to minus 150 now. Gaethje's at plus 125, so money coming in on Dustin as well. So going with Dustin as my pick, I'm a big fan, so I'm probably going to lay off this betting so I can just sit back and watch some violence. And that about does it for UFC 291, guys. That's the breakdown. I hope you learned something new, something different from the other breakdowns that have been going on or guys have been putting out. And yeah, let's go ahead and cash some bets. Watch a very good card on Saturday and just have a good time. As always, follow your boy on the socials, Twitter, YouTube, and BetMMA.tips. It's Bobby Bets Fights. Signing off. Peace.